guys get a chance to do service day today? Right, so as we said, they can come, get the ice cream, whatever, and come. If their projects take long, then they can come later, not sure, but I'm hoping we get more. So today, as you can see from the slide, how to take tests, exams, and records. This is one of the most important topics that we can cover in this class. Because you need this in every class that you take on this campus. You need it, even when you go to graduate school, you still need it. So it's, last year we were not lucky. Last year we didn't have this topic. And so you guys are the first to get it, the best secret. Okay? And so today we have Dr. Lawrence Wong. He's a professor of biochemistry. He teaches in the biology program. How many of you are in science? So maybe you won't see him this first year, but he usually teaches the upper classes. And so we are happy that he could get some time to come and help us and unfold this topic for you. So let's welcome him with an applause.
Thank you. Let's just start out with a Bible verse. This is one of my favorite verses actually when it comes to being a teacher. This is from NIV, 2 Corinthians 9:6. It says, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." You guys know what it means, right? In this text. It means if you want to get an A, you're going to put some work in, right? And part of that work might be writing an exam, which is probably coming up shortly for you guys, or even writing a big paper, right? So this is something that is an important skill. So before we start, let's have a word. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day here. We thank you that our students here got a chance to serve the community and be able to get out in the sunshine. And now, as we continue the lessons here, we ask that you give them the ability to concentrate as they will hopefully learn something after this class. Be with them, and we ask you to bless them, keep them healthy through the semester so that they will get the A's that they deserve. Thank you for your love for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so Don mentioned that this is a very important topic, right? So basically, as a student, you cannot avoid this. You will have to take a test sometime this summer, right? It could be a quiz, a test, an exam. Now the difference between those things are all just the intensity of them, right? So I'm going to break it down to 4 different groups. Okay? The test, how to prepare for a test or exam, what to do during the exam day. Okay? I'm going to look into some of the things like how do you deal with maybe multiple choice or a written question, and then of course some of us suffer from test anxiety. Okay? Trust me, because when I was an undergrad like you, I did suffer from test anxiety. And then finally, I don't think I'm really qualified for that, but I think I can talk a little bit about research papers. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we can write some academic papers, which include things like research papers or lab reports. Okay. Now, when we prepare for a quiz, a test, and exam, I mentioned that that's a very important part of student life. But if you go unprepared, what happens? You will get nervous, you fail, right? So, but the thing is, if you prepare, you will also have confidence and you succeed. Okay? And preparing for this test would take maybe a few hours, depending on how smart you are, right? But oftentimes it takes days, weeks, and even months in advance, right? So you have to kind of prepare yourself not only mentally, but also physically. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we need to do, both mentally and physically, right? Now, and of course, you guys all know a good test-taking skills can make the difference between whether you're going to get a C in class or an A+, right? Okay. Now, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel, so I, of course, did some research, and I came up to this website, which is actually quite nice. It has 10 points, and I added to it and took some of the things away from it, but if you guys are interested, you can really look at that website. Oh, by the way, take some notes now too, but you need to fall back on notes later on, because you will be testing this, right? Okay, so preparation is the key to success. You guys all know Alexander Graham Bell, right? The father of this, right? Telephone, right? Now, that's really true thing that we have to prepare to take the test. Okay, so what are some things we need to do? Now, in fact, probably the most important thing is before taking the test, in the preparation, taking good notes. Okay? Taking good notes that you can understand, that you can also use it as a study tool later on, right? Now, you tend to actually retain more knowledge if you actually actively doing something, right? This is called active learning, right? And everyone works a little different. I know some of you are writing really well, right? So you need to write it down and stuff like that. Some of you are listening, okay? Some are auditory listeners, right? Others like to just look at pictures and they can do that. There's some people that have photographic memory, they can look at a picture and they can remember everything, right? But most of us are not like that. Now, in active learning, basically you have to reproduce information and rehash it, okay? And this is why I didn't give you the notes before this class, because I want you to practice a little bit of active learning, right? Okay, now, the notes are important because it gives you something besides your textbook. You guys all know you have a textbook, right, in most classes. This class may not have one, but you will have some kind of reference material. And this will actually give you the additional things that are needed. Now, your notes need to be somewhat detailed enough so that when you study them over, you can understand them. And also, you can maybe use this to make things like flashcards, right? How many of you know something called Anki? Perfect, you know that, right? Anki is a flashcard system, and I noticed some of my students actually doing that, even in class, when they're actually listening to that, they're actually making flashcards, right? And some of them study that way, right? So Anki is really good if you're tested predominantly through a multiple choice type questions, where you have options and stuff like that, and so Anki works really well. Now, the other thing that I see a lot of kids do nowadays, instead of writing down, they get a little lazy, and so they have a great little cell phone, and they start taking pictures of all the board, right, the slides and stuff like that, which is okay. But how many of you, when you take a picture, know where to retrieve it? I don't sometimes. I have to look for it, right? So it's probably not the best way to record your lectures, okay? So it's probably better to have a pen and paper or something like that, or a sheet of paper like that, or something where you can actually write your notes, okay? So take good notes. The second thing is to cultivate good study habits. Okay, some of you have done really well in high school, and you actually have some of these habits, right? But some of you don't, and so you need to actually work hard at that. Now, one of the first things I say to do is to find a comfortable place to study. Okay, what does it mean to be a comfortable place? On your bed? Probably no, probably not, right? If I read on my bed, I tend to go to sleep in 15 minutes. So don't do it on the bed, right? Some people like to do that, right? So a comfortable place also means that you are not going to be disturbed, right? Good lighting, right? And sometimes you may have a roommate that likes to listen to loud music, and so you will have to find another spot like in the library, right? You're fortunate that you have a beautiful library there, and there's lots of little nooks and crannies, right? Then you can claim your spot. Okay? This is something that you should do, right? You should find a little library and claim your spot. Right? Okay, so also free from distractions, right? We have the cell phone nowadays, so it often distracts us. But put it on silent mode, and even put it on a sleep mode, okay? And reward yourself and say, maybe I'll just check it every hour. Okay? I know when my daughters, I have two girls that are doctors now. When they were in medical school, they had to go through a lot of material. Every day they studied about 7 to 8 hours. And so what they did was, they would study for 1 hour, check the phone for 5 minutes, and then go back and study for another hour. Okay? And so that 5-minute reward is enough to get them through the next hour. Okay, so maybe do something like that, set an alarm or something so you can check yourself. Okay? Now, one thing about good study habits is you need to actually stay on top of your notes, review your notes daily. And the other concept of good study habits is study early and often. Okay? Now, give yourself a lot of time, especially if you're preparing for a big test, right? Now, someone would say, well, I will probably only need 2 days to study for this, right? Life is full of surprises, right? You may get a phone call from home that's pretty distressing, and you may not be able to concentrate for the next day or so, right? So give yourself time, way in advance, right? So that you can take some of these life surprises and take it with a little bit of ability to still manage your study, okay? Now, the other thing too is don't cram, right? So don't wait until the last minute, and because that causes stress and anxiety. Now, you may have been able to get through high school by cramming, studying the night before, but as you get through your university classes, you're going to find that the 100 class has a little bit more material than your high school. Your second year is going to have more, and then you come to Dr. Wong's class, right, where it's packed with material, like information. So 2 nights before the exam is not going to cut it, right? Now, the other thing that's also known to work really well for a lot of people is something called spaced repetition. Don't sit down in one sitting and study everything, right? What you want to do is you want to be able to set aside some time, maybe say, okay, well, if this exam is 2 weeks from now, I'm going to spend 1 hour every day, and 14 hours I should be able to get all my studying done, right? So each time you do your 1 hour, you're going to review everything, and you're going to do it, and you're going to repeat it. So you have this space of repetition that allows you to then form those neural, connections. You guys all know a little bit about neurology, right? The more we do that, the more we remember, right? So that's just very important, okay? So it's a better actually to study a little bit every day, okay? And so again, cram for an exam. I say don't, okay? Don't cram for an exam. You're gonna get yourself in a lot of trouble when you try that. It's also very counterproductive. When you cram, you don't retain information, and then when you come to final exam, you are still having to study the material again. Okay, so try to do this in small portions, get it in long-term memory, so that when you write a final exam, you can always fall back on that long-term memory, right? Okay. The other thing that we need to do too is also do not forsake other materials that will help you learn. Okay? Things like making sure you do your homework. Okay? We give faculty assigned homework for a reason, right? To reinforce the material during the class, right? So, okay. This is what I mean. Okay, so do your homework. Do it so you get it handed in and be able to get it graded so you can get some feedback, right? Make some study guides. Okay, your teacher might be doing some study guides for you, but if you don't have those access, then you make your own, right? Take advantage of any practice exams, right? Some of the teachers actually will give a practice exam for you to try. If not, Google for practice exams on the internet, right? And you can find some of those to try to do to help you study. Okay? Now, another thing too is to form a pure study group. Okay, now, not everyone likes to study with people around them, right? Okay, however, sometimes it's actually beneficial to have someone test you on the material you already know, right? So you can test each other. Now, one of the things that you have to do though is you need to do some independent studying first, right? So the last point is, your group have to study on your own first. Okay, so make sure you do that first, okay? And then maybe get a group of students together, and don't pick a boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Why don't we do that? You get interrupted all the time, right? When you do that. Now, make sure you pick someone that wants to also get the A in the class, right? Okay? it's kind of equal ability maybe. Yeah, serious about getting an A in class, find the students, right? Now, don't study with a large group too. Okay? Try to minimize the size of the group, maybe 3, 4 maximum, right? Because the bigger the group, the more you feel like you can't give your 2 cents, right? Because the rationale behind a study group is to be able to say something and get a response or ask questions and stuff like that. So quizzing each other, okay, with knowledge, right? Now, what are some of the benefits of a study partner or study partners? Study partners are encouragers, right? They encourage you, right? They may give you emotional or kind of moral kind of support, right? Because you're all going through the same thing together, right? Yeah. The thing that I like a lot here is this third one, accountability partner. Okay? Accountability partner. Here's someone that's going to make sure that you are also studying, right? Okay? So, it's checking up with you. Okay, have you finished chapter 3? No. Okay, you better finish chapter 3. Because we're meeting this Friday to talk about it, right? Okay. You could also have a situation where some of your buddies are terrorists. You know, you need to talk to someone, right? Or even a tutor meaning that you may not understand something and you're getting help from your buddies, right? And also, the other thing too is if you are teaching the knowledge, the information, it often is better too because you are actually repeating that information and you're actually reaffirming what you know, right? So being a student, trying to learn from someone, or teaching it is a huge benefit, okay? Now, all of this is actually quite important, okay? And I mentioned the accountability partner. Now, Melinda, you guys know a little bit about Melinda. You know about med schools, right? So, they started this during COVID years because during COVID, they had to kind of stay within a small room, and they broke them down into something called a life group, okay? LIFE group, okay? Now, what it entails is about 10 people, and these 10 people will roll through the first 2 years of school together. And actually, during COVID, they stayed in one room, and they made sure that they only interacted with those 10 people. During COVID, they couldn't interact with people. So they were like a family unit, right? And then sometimes they would eat together, okay? They would go and play sports together, okay? But what's really important too, they were accountable for each other too, okay? So in fact, if a student, one of our students would often sleep in, the accountability partner would call them and say, hey, how are you not in school yet, okay? So that's what you need to do. So you need to have someone check up with you, right? So these peer groups are really good, okay? Okay, now, the other thing too we want to do is to prioritize optimal health. If your physical health is not good, your mental health is not good too, right? So, one thing that we often don't have enough of is sleep, okay? And so we need to prioritize sleeping, and when you cram, you always stay up late, right? And that actually does more harm when you don't have enough sleep, right? So, especially during the night before a test, right? You tend to sometimes cram a little bit more, right? So stick to a normal routine, okay? Get a good sleep schedule going, right? And because not everyone needs 8 hours of sleep, right? Some people need 5 hours. You need 9 hours? That's fine. All my girls need 9 hours because they went to med school, right? So you just have to make sure you arrange that time. Okay, now some of you sleep much better in the morning. I'm not a morning person, so I can't get up at 5 o'clock in my wife. My wife gets up at 5. She's good at that way. But she also goes to bed at 9 o'clock, right? So she goes to bed early and gets up early. But I like to stay up until midnight because, you know what, between 9 and 12, no one's bugging me, it's quiet. I like that quietness. So I can go to my office and work on things and stuff like that. Write a big test and meeting test for me, right? But then I like to sleep to about 7 o'clock too, right? And that's my schedule, right? But I still get my sleep, okay? So make sure you get the regular sleep schedule. Make sure you get also quality sleep too. Don't watch a movie before you go to sleep too, and just get to sleep, right? Now, sleep is important because if you have enough sleep, you stay alert, especially in a long class like that. During the test, you'll be alert. After the test, you're alert. It improves your long-term memory, right? Because you're not stressed out. Enhances your mood. You guys all know you don't get enough sleep, you're pretty grouchy, right? Okay. It also decreases your stress levels, okay? Because sleep often rewards you with a good feeling hormones, right? That will allow you to feel good about yourself, okay? Okay, another thing to do is to prioritize nutrition, right? Good food, right? Okay. Now, like sleeping, is actually part of preparation too, right? Because when you're hungry, what happens? You're grumpy too, right? You can't concentrate, right? How many of you have seen some of these commercials or this study? There's one particularly I think of, the old Henry bar. It's a chocolate bar. And the students studying and they're hungry and sort of running and get a chocolate bar, right? Do you guys know that when you study, you actually use a lot of ATP? Okay, about 25% of the ATP you produce in your body, you actually use in your brain cells, right? For studying. So you get studying, you're actually burning that energy. You're burning glucose, right? And that's why you're hungry, right? And your blood sugars go down, right? Okay, now, so but the thing though is to eat regular meals, well-balanced meal too. So don't always eat just carbs, right? Or fats or stuff like that. But make sure you get a balance, good meals. Don't skip meals. Some people like to skip breakfast, right? But try not to skip meals. Don't overeat too. And try not to indulge in junk food. Okay? Junk food is usually sugar and fats, which is not good for you. Okay? Now, it's important to have good nutrition because it often wards off sickness, right? Now, a lot of times I find just before Christmas, before exams, a lot of kids get sick. Okay? One kid, the bone room gets sick. The next one neighbor is sick too because the food just goes down. Okay? And a lot of that is due to, you're so busy, you're trying to do things, you're skipping breakfast, so you're not getting optimal sleep, nutrition, and things like that. Now, don't forget water too. Okay, stay hydrated. Make sure you drink lots of water. Okay? And that can help you with good nutrition. Okay? Now, there are other things that are very important too. Some people will need to have a lot of exercise, right? So these are other things that you can do, right? Exercise, right? Make sure you have a routine. Go to the gym, go on the treadmill in the winter, right? Or walk around campus, you need just a more, not so high impact exercise, right? Now, mental health is also important, right? The key word right now we use a lot is self-care, right? So for young ladies, maybe you want to go and get a pedicure or manicure, right? That's self-care, right? Makes you feel good, right? And of course, worship, spend time with God. And just find the time, even 15 minutes or so in the morning, or even for me, it's always before I go to sleep. That's the best time. Just certain time in the Bible and that kind of relaxes yourself. Right? So those are even components of your health, right? Okay. Now that was 5 things we talked about, right? So we're going to talk about now what you need to do during exam day. So before I go any further, are there any questions before any comments? Don't be afraid of me. No comments? No questions? Okay.
So what should they do in a study session when they're in a group?
In the group? It just, yeah. How do you start that? One thing you want to do is, I often tell kids is start writing down questions when you're studying at home, and then quiz each other. Okay? In the British system, we call it spotting questions, right? You spot questions, so you pretend to see what the teacher's going to ask. Okay? And after a while, you get good at it, right? So start with those things, right? Questioning with your friends and stuff, making sure they understand that, right? Show off your memory by listing out a bunch of things, like 20 things, right? So those are some things we do, right? Okay, so no questions, right? So what do you do on the exam day, right? So one of the things that we often experience is anxiety. That's anxiety. And so we try to minimize this test anxiety, and if we can minimize that, we can usually perform much, much better on that test, right? Okay, so we can increase our performance and anxiety decreases. Okay, now, one of the things I often don't see people do is to arrive at the test early. Okay? Now, a good rule of thumb is at least 10 minutes before the test is starting, right? Because what you're going to do is sometimes you have to figure out the things you need, right? You need a calculator, you forgot your calculator, right? So at least you can still run back to the board, find your calculator for the test, right? Some of you may need to find out where the bathrooms are, right? Use your building, especially you guys, right? So those are things that you can do during those 10 minutes, right? So once you settle in, you have time, you can sit down and kind of relax a little bit, get yourself de-stress. Some people will meditate. I would just pray. That's what you do, right? And that you can do that easily before a test. Right? Ask God to give you confidence and stuff like that for the test, right? Now, another thing that you want to do too is, I know that some of you like certain seats, right? Pick a seat that is good for you, right? Okay? Choose the best seat in the house. Okay? Some of you like to be in the front, right? Some of you like to be located where there is a clock ticking, so you can see the clock, right? So just whatever will work for you, right? When you get down on your seat, get organized, you know, make sure you have 10 pencils, 3 erasers, right? And stuff like that, right? Your water, you drink, some Kleenex maybe, and stuff like that, depending on the online tests, right? Now, we also apply this to your online test, right? Make sure you log in early. Make sure your computer works. I'm glad that we don't have to do online exams now, but some of us still do quiz on D2L, and so make sure you are able to be early too. Okay, now, I mentioned the clock thing, right? You need to be able to keep time, and that allows you to pace yourself, right? Now, most of us have a cell phone now, so we use the cell phone all the time, right? But you guys all know that you're not allowed to have a cell phone for exam, right? So maybe wear your watch that you don't often wear, right? Just so that you can keep time, right? Or, like I mentioned, sit where you can look at the clock, okay? So that's important to put up with that too, okay? Now, the first thing you want to do as you get the exam is to read and scan over the entire exam, okay? Now, what are some things you want to look for in this first scanning? Look for instructions. Okay? Take time to read the instructions very carefully. Sometimes the teacher might be giving a verbal instruction. Listen to your teacher, especially in the beginning, right? Next, you might want to scan the test and kind of plan. Okay? This test is going to be a pretty long test. It's 50 multiple choice questions. There's 25 points as to a written part, right? So you now need to decide what's more important. Should I do the multiple choice question first, or should I do the written? What would you guys do, people? You get written and multiple choice. Multiple choice, right? I would do the multiple choice, but some people also like to do the written choice. And that's because multiple choice was 50 points and written was 25, right? So you make sure you scan them so you can plan and use your time wisely, right? And the next thing is mentally prepare yourself. As you go through those questions, see how many essays that you need to write, how many short answers, because it usually takes a little longer time to write a written response, right? Whereas multiple choice, you can probably whip through it in 1 minute, right? Okay? Okay, so the next thing is to answer questions, right? So you answer questions you know first. That's often the rule of thumb. Do whatever you know, okay? So try to do that as quickly as possible, and then sometimes you may have to come upon a situation where you're afraid that by the time you're halfway in the exam, you're going to forget everything, right? So we call it a brain dump. Okay, so sometimes you see an essay question that asks for something like that, and you can immediately remember the things that you need to write down. So just quickly write down on that essay question the 10 points that you need to complete your answer, right? That's called brain dump. You're dumping the information, right, into that list form so that you can come back and then strong on that, right? Okay, so if you can't answer a question though, skip first, okay? And when you're going through that, you are kind of keeping in mind the time, be mindful of time, so that those that skip, you can come back and redo, okay? So that's what's important. Okay? So the second part of it is to answer the questions you skip, okay? After you've done the easy ones, you want to come back and redo those questions, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, you find that those questions are not as challenging as the first time you read it, right? And that's because maybe teachers ask a very similar question, maybe 3 pages down in the test, right? And you knew the answer to that, right? So your mind is also warmed up by now, because you're going full speed now, and your mind's going, and so you're remembering things, and so it's actually much better the second time around, right? However, you may still struggle with a question that you did not know the answer, right? Now, if it's a multiple choice question, and if the teacher doesn't deduct a wrong answer point, where, sometimes the teacher will deduct a point from the right answer from the wrong answers. I don't do that. Most teachers say don't do that. Then make sure you attempt it. Just do it, because maybe you'll want to get an answer, right? So don't leave answers blank. Okay? Sometimes a teacher will give you partial credit, right? So you can get 50% of the grade in that question. That's better than getting a 0, right? Okay? So make sure you do that. Okay? Okay, here is an example of. Oops. Okay, this was a joke here, people. It says 5 words you can spell. You won't leave it blank, right? Okay. So the teacher goes in +2. Okay? Instead of 5 points, +2. Okay, now there are different kinds of questions. You will be looking at essay questions or written questions, for example, short answers. A lot of teachers use multiple choice, and teachers use true, false, right? Or sometimes matching, things like that. Most of us tend to use multiple choice and written questions, right? So there's actually different strategies when we look at how we answer these things, right? With multiple choice questions, all the answers are already provided, right? You just need to find out what the right answer is, okay? So in the multiple choice, make sure you read the question carefully, but also the answers, right? Because a lot of times, especially with third-year class and stuff like that, a lot of the answers might be very, very similar, okay? And the difference in the answer might be the wrong answer, right? Even before you look at the ABC, sometimes when you read the question, try to formulate an answer that is important, okay? And see if that fits any of these answers, right? That might work really well too. Okay? Again, skip questions you don't know the answers to, and come back. Okay? Don't stay too long around. You spend 15 seconds. It's not something you know. Put an X by it. Okay, make sure you put an X and then come back to it, right? Now, don't rely on patterns. Okay, some people say, well, the teacher's going to make the answer D. Okay? And for people like me, my answers are randomized, okay, when I make them. So sometimes it's A, sometimes B, sometimes C, sometimes D, right? So it could be anything, right? And some teachers are even pretty mean, where if it's a big class like that, they make 3 versions of the test, right? Where some people will be writing a question where the answer is A, some people will be writing a test the same question, but the right answer is C, right? Okay? So don't look for patterns, just make sure it's the right answer, right? Oftentimes you can narrow the answers to 2 responses that you can decide on, okay? So typically multiple choice questions are 4 or 5 options, right? So if you can narrow it down to 2, then you know that you have 50% chance of getting the right answer, right? Instead of all 5 and you have only 20%, right? So So try to narrow it down as much as possible, right? How do you narrow it down? Maybe underline some words, okay? And that's often a very good thing to do, to underline familiar words. Cross out things that you know for sure is wrong, right? And then that's how you get to those answers, right? Now, I don't really have a lot of time to do that, so I'm trying to time myself here. And so I did give you a website from the University of Toronto where they actually look at 10 common types of multiple choice questions and how to solve them. Okay, so if you guys are interested, go and look at our website. It's actually a nice little document with strategies and things like that. So this is your homework. Okay, how about short answers? I often say in the preparation, try to think of your, try to get into your teacher's head. Okay? Try to think and see what the teacher is going to ask. Okay? And sometimes it's very predictable, right? When you look at the chapter, sometimes the ones that are big highlighted, all the headlines and stuff like that, and section headlines, are probably more important than some obscure little note in the bottom of the text. Right? So you can often predict those questions, and a good thing to do oftentimes is to actually write down some of these questions so that you can ask your buddies in the study group, right? Again, answer every question. Even if you don't know the full answer, again, you may get partial credit for it, right? My old teacher used to say, you write a paragraph answer, the first line has to be correct, and the rest doesn't have to be right. Okay, but I do read the whole answer, so try not to do that. Okay, always start with the easier questions and go back to the harder ones, right? Okay. Skip it, but come back to it again. And usually you might find context as you go through the exam that, hey, this is maybe a very similar kind of question, and you can kind of decide if the teacher already asked questions, he's not going to have the same question, so the answer for that one might be quite different from the first answer. Right? So you be in favor of that. Okay? Make sure you read the question very carefully. I find that a lot of kids don't read questions carefully. Okay? Look for words like not, except, right? Those things really trip you up, right? So make sure you read the question carefully. And when you answer a short answer question, be concise. Okay? And try not to just fill it up, the space, but try to be more concise, right? Sometimes you do it in 2 or 3 lines instead of having 10 lines, right? Okay, any questions, people? Yeah.
Is it really good to start with the easiest questions if you're in the scenario where you might run out of brain power before you finish the test?
You run out of brain power before you finish the test?
Because then you have the hardest questions you haven't done,
Yeah.
and your brain is exhausted.
Yeah, okay. And so in those situations like that instead of just leaving it blank and skipping it, just write the first impressions you think that the answer should be,
Okay.
and then come back to it.
So that when you're reading it, you have at least something to work off of
Yeah.
for the harder questions. Okay.
Now, everyone works a little differently, but that's how I work, okay? And you might apply to you. Okay? That's how it works. Now, how about strategy for essay questions? Essay questions are much longer, right? Half a page, 2 pages, and stuff like that. And in this case here, it's actually very good to predict what those essay questions are. One thing that you might want to do is to put an outline. As you read the question, just quickly outline what your answers are going to be, right? Put down the points that you're going to do, and then work on that outline to write a full answer, right? Now, start each paragraph with one of your points in that outline, right? As a topic sentence, right? So you may have several points that you work on, so they should be all different paragraphs, right? Don't just do one big paragraph, right? Now, oftentimes you might need to summarize it, tie it together, okay, at the end. And that's more like a conclusion kind of sentence, right? Again, pace yourself, because it takes a lot more time when you're writing an essay question, right? Again, it's better to be concise, get to the point, instead of having flowery language and stuff like that, right? In English, you might get away with that, but in sciences, you need to get right to the point each time. Okay, another thing that you have to do before you hand in the test is to review it before turning in the test, right? Now again, this may be something we can't do because we're really running short of time, but if you have time, check your work, make sure it's complete, right? There's no blanks. Make sure you have answered every question that you skipped. And when you have time, even double check your work, especially things like calculations, if you're doing a math test or something like that, chemistry test, make sure you just punch those numbers in the calculator again. Check for things like written typos, okay? And sometimes misspelled words, because if you don't have this correctly spelled, your teacher may have trouble trying to understand you too, right? And oftentimes, make sure you do this, write your name in the test, right? I have kids that sometimes forget that. And they came out from a school where it's really small, and so two students or whatever, so they don't have to write the name, so write the name down, right? Now, think positively, okay? When you're doing a test, or the day of the test, make sure you have positive thoughts, right? I can do this, right? I am smart, I'm capable. Don't think negative thoughts, right? Because that will destroy you. Now, if you have completed the task, you feel like you did poorly, don't worry too much about it, right? Okay? Feel like, hey, you know what? I'm going to start fresh. I didn't do well. You may have actually done better. And I remember going through exams in graduate school where everyone failed, and then I found that I did the best. Okay? And so, there are situations like that. So don't worry about it, because you know what? If you fail that test or whatever, take it as a learning opportunity, right? Go back and say, okay, this is what I'm not going to do again. Okay? I'm not going to repeat this mistake. I'm going to do this other way this time, right? So that you can correct it yourself. So that's the 10 points you need to think about when you do test number 2. Okay? Any questions? 10, easy to remember, right? So you will have to write a quiz in this, right? Or test. A quiz in the test, basically. Okay, now I mentioned test anxiety. Every student has test anxiety, right? And sometimes it's because we didn't prepare enough, right? Other times you might be sick, right? Now, that happens, right? Just, best intentions, we prepare so well that that morning we wake up with high fever or something like that. And it's an important test we can't miss, right? Okay. Now, if you're lucky that pre-test nervousness is mild, you might be able to just go out and run around the block and then feel good, right? Other times it could be really, really, really bad, right? Now, test anxiety is actually a form of performance anxiety, right? Some of you watch the Olympics this summer, right? Some of these people choked up because they had a little bit of anxiety. So essentially it's a mental, physical, and emotional symptoms of this that you experience that can actually lead to you doing poorly in this test, right? So I often say though, a little bit of stress is okay, and a little bit of anxiety is okay, because it kind of makes you give you that adrenaline surge, right? You need to keep yourself focused and energized. But too much of it is not good, right? So for some people, they throw up. So how do you do that? Some of you may, right? You feel nauseous. Or you feel really sick, right? Suddenly you feel fainty, right? Okay, so some of the things are really bad, right? So we try to mitigate that, right? Now, all this has anxiety is expressed as physical symptoms or mental emotions, right? And these are not good, right? Some people even they get really angry too, right? It's a form of anxiety too. Now, how many of you have suffered from this? You go into a test, you're a little anxious, and you're going to say, oh. Okay. How many have actually experienced this? My mind went blank. I have, right? Or suddenly, you learn it, and then suddenly you go to test, oh, don't remember. And that usually is associated with test anxiety too, right? Okay, so how do we mitigate some of these things, right? Preparation. Okay, remember I talked about preparation? The more you prepare, the better you're equipped to then handle that stress, right? I mentioned stay healthy, right? Sleep, nutritious food, right? Focus on positive thoughts rather than negative thoughts, right? Take time for self-care before and after the test, right? Meditate or practice breathing exercises before and during the test. I've seen kids do that, right? Listen to calming music before the test, right? Don't listen to rock and roll or heavy metal, right? But listen to maybe some classical, get yourself relaxed, right? Arrive early, okay? Come prepared with all the tools you need, right? Pencils, pens, right? And stuff like that. Those are small little things you can do to reduce the anxiety, right? But the most important thing is to prepare yourself, right? Study and make sure you have preparation for that, right? Always remember that one test will not ruin your life. Okay? Even if you don't do well, there's going to be no opportunities, right? Okay? Now, you realize that testing, like an exam, quizzes, and stuff like that, is a huge component of your course, right? Anywhere from 60 to 70% of it, right? So if you can handle doing well in the 60 to 70%, you can do usually quite well. Okay? So try to mitigate this anxiety test, right? Now, certainly, if you can't cope, then seek professional help, right? How many of you know the Sakala Center? You're all right. You all do, right? Don't feel afraid to go there. Reach out to your teacher, okay? And say, teacher, I'm a little anxious. I don't understand this. Could you help me? Okay? Make sure you do that, right? Tell your parents to pray for you. That's something that my girls used to tell me all the time before the exam. And I still do this. My students email me just before a big medical school exam. They say, pray for me. So I pray for them. They feel that helps, right? Tell your friends about your fears and anxieties, and they can help you, right? Remember that therapist I talked about? Sometimes you write, right? That's your therapist, right? Okay, now, the last section is looking at academic writing. Okay, now, academic writing, basically, we are communicating. What are we communicating? Basically, our thoughts, ideas, opinions, but usually some kind of written form, right? Now, another thing to note too is most papers, academic writing is a huge component of the course, right? Anywhere from 5 to 20%, right? Depending on what type of course you have, right? Now, not only communication, it also increases other components or qualities you have, right? Things like critical thinking. Anytime you write a paper, you actually have to think about your thoughts, right? Before you put it down. So the critical thinking increases, right? Promotes research proficiency. When you need to find information, you need to go to the library, right? You know how to do it because you've done this many times when you write a paper, right? It also allows for personal and professional growth because writing is also important later on, right? It also upholds intellectual integrity, right? One of the things that we often get challenged with nowadays is our lazy nature, right? So what happens when we write something, we don't really feel like it, we say, ChatGPT, tell me what to do, right? Okay, now, ethically that's not right, right? You should be able to write your own paper, right? Coming from a teacher that's been doing this some years now, we can usually tell whether you use ChatGPT in your papers. One of the telltale signs is the English is perfect. But the thoughts are not there, okay? The points are not there. They're usually not connected, because usually what happens is the student asks ChatGPT one point and then ChatGPT comes up with something and put it together in 10 minutes, right? So, teacher will know, okay? You don't have to use programs, although they're programs. They're actually programs, right? But usually when you read something that's, this guy doesn't have that most of the time, you know that they're cheating, right? And you guys all know that using AI is actually considered cheating, right? Maybe someday we'll change it and it'll be common, but for now it's still considered cheating, right? Now, writing is a universal skill. It affects every discipline. If you're an art student, you're a science student, you have to write some kind of test question, a written question, right? You have to write an English essay, everyone has to do English, right? You have to do a biology lab report, that's important too, right? Or even some classes, like third year biology class, you'd be asked to write a research report, right? So one time or another you're going to do that. Even some emails, I notice some kids who don't spend very much time writing emails to the professor, but I notice some of them are really good. They actually took some time on it, right? So communication is important too, right? Now, basically, your ability to articulate something usually reflects on how well you do academically, right? So oftentimes your grades are reflected, you write well, right? Your GPA is good, right? That's all my GPA is, right? Your homework, right? When it's returned to you, that's good. But it also sets the stage for your professional life. What happens after, right? So writing is actually something that you don't just do at university. You're going to use it the rest of your life, right? If you go to grad school or professional school, you're going to be writing. Okay? You're going to be writing, right? Now, the intentions of writing in beyond university might be a little different, right? The university might be for a report, right? Or a paper. But for grad school, it might be your dissertation, your thesis, right? Your contribution to science, right? So it's a little bit different. You're writing some business proposals. It's to make money, right? So it's a little different. Okay? So think of it as a transferable skill. Learn it now, and you're going to use it later too, right? Okay. How many of you have read these books? The Man Who Mistook His Wife for God. Okay, what's common about these books? How many of you have read these books? You have? It's good. It was good. All of them? Which one? Oh, good. It's good. If you haven't had a chance to read it, these are exceptional books to read. What's common about them? The authors, right? What do these authors do? Are they writers? They're all doctors, actually. MDs. Some of them are surgeons. Some of them are, this guy that wrote about the man who pursued this guy for a hat, he's a neurologist. And he wrote quite a lot of these interesting stories about neurology. But they're fantastic books to read. I actually find that doctors write quite well. They have to be quite concise. And they're actually quite good at their works. Okay? So you don't have to be an English professor to write well. You can be anything. Okay, so in academic writing, oftentimes it's different from fictional story, right? Because what happens is we usually write about a topic that provides some kind of analysis, some kind of interpretation, or even an argument, and it involves some form of in-depth research, right? Okay. And what you're trying to do is to basically propagate this knowledge from your writing. And the knowledge you should get from reading this, and the writer, all at the same time, is the one that should be the expert in this, right? When someone's writing something, you are the expert in this topic, right? So you have now engaged with a variety of sources, okay? And you also may be making an original contribution to this debate, right? Okay? Now again, I didn't mean to take this from a website, but here are some of the things that I took from this website here. So again, I'm going to read something, right? So what should we do as we write? The first thing we should do is to understand the assignment, right? Read it very carefully and obtain clarification if necessary. Okay? Now, most of you will know that you have to write a paper usually at the beginning of the semester. Right? You guys all know what a course outline is, right? Usually in the course outline it says paper topic or something that you have to write, right? So if you don't understand what it's asked of you, make sure you get clarification, right? Each of these, make sure you identify what the assignment goal is, what the paper is about, what you actually need to get out of this paper. Deadline is important, right? When is it due? Okay? In my course outlines, I usually have all my paper assignments at the beginning of the semester, and they usually do maybe 3 weeks before the school's semester ends, right? So you actually have at least 8 weeks to work on it, right? So make sure you know that deadline, right? Okay? Make sure you know the length. How many pages is it? 10 pages, 5 pages? Look at the formatting. Maybe your teacher has a specific formatting, or even submission. Some people might want a hard copy. Others would like it into Dropbox. So there's no more Dropboxes, right? That's mostly the normal way of doing that. So as you think about those things, think of your time frame, right? Trust me, things are not happening as much now. So spend time doing the papers now, right? Because as you get through the semester, there's more things piling up. Usually papers are always due when every paper, where every class has the papers due, right? So try to kind of organize that. Make sure you know the time frame. Be also realistic, right? If you're going to go home for Thanksgiving, right? And you're going to say, I'm going to write it during Thanksgiving. Well, I'll tell you what, you're probably not going to write it during Thanksgiving because you're going to be seeing some family you haven't seen for a long time. You're going to enjoy some food, you get into some food coma situations, right? So plan wisely, right? Make sure you have enough time to do research, to write it, and finally edit it, okay? Okay, so make sure you understand that assignment. Choose a topic. If you're not been assigned a topic, make sure you choose a topic that is interesting to you and also will meet the criteria of assignments. Usually a teacher has specific criteria when it comes to these topics, right? Try to use a variety of sources. Most of us will be using journals in science, for example. Some of the books can be useful too in the library. And you guys all know if you don't have a book in the library, sometimes you can request it from the sister library too, right? Websites, okay. But a lot of websites also pretty junky too, not really reliable. So make sure they are reliable websites when you use them, right? Try not to miss anything glaring, so try to do a pretty complete search, right? Now, as you think about the topic, think about questions like, I want to know how, what, and why, right? These are some things you can think about as you think about the next topic, which is the thesis statement. Okay? So some of you are familiar with the thesis statement, right? In English, basically, that is your central statement where it establishes your purpose and position in the paper, right? Most papers, you have to take a quick opinion, and so this thesis defines that opinion, basically. Usually it's very short, concise, 1 or 2 lines. It could be contentious too, because it means try to stir up some excitement in the reader, right? And also it has to be somewhat coherent, right? That means that someone who reads it should understand what you're trying to say. Okay, now, when you are writing the paper, every paragraph should support this thesis statement, right? So always use that as your guideline. Okay? That should always be followed. Now, when you're writing a paper, it's okay to revise this thesis statement too. Sometimes you can refine it a little bit. So it's an ongoing thing to do. Okay, now the next thing that we often do is to create an outline. An outline is just a list. Okay? The topics, the key topics you're going to talk about, your arguments, you're going to say this, and this. Okay? The evidence, for example. and usually you divide it into specific headings, right? And this is very important, right? Now, this is actually a very good tool because you can always look back at your outline and see where you are in the writing, right? And it kind of inform the writing too. Okay? Now, this is one area where you may be able to use ChatGPT, right? How often do that? I say ChatGPT, tell me about this process, and it gives me an outline or something, and I use that outline, right? I try not to use that word for word, right? That's just an example.
What were you saying about taking?
Let's say getting into generating outline,
Oh.
okay? So that's okay, right? As long as it's in copy.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, because I use ChatGPT
Yeah.
for like work. So when I do something and I do my answer based on that, it's like, how is it sometimes just to remove and like additional explanation? That's after I
Okay.
answer from my question.
What I found through the years of ChatGPT, which is still coming on, is that it's not always correct. I have graded some papers where they have references given by ChatGPT when I actually check the references. It's completely the opposite of what it's supposed to be. And so this is be perfect. Now you guys all know that the new iPhone is integrated with AI now, so it's going to be part of the OS, right? You know what was scary yesterday? I got in my car and my Apple Watch informed me it's 12 minutes to home. How did it know that I was going home? Right? So you kind of looked at my habits, because about 5 o'clock, that's when I was in my car. Right? So this is going to be a system that's not going to be too much. Right? Okay, so what we do is we have the outline, just so you can list it, right? And you keep looking back at your list, right? Okay? So then you start your first draft. We often say, right now, perfect labor, right? Don't worry about grammar and stuff like that, sense of structure, just write it down. Try to write it as much as possible as a first draft, right? But it will help you if you stay organized now. Okay, so try to be organized, try to be logical when it comes to the ordering of the paragraphs and stuff like that. And again, go back to the outline and see where you are sitting in your writing, right? Oftentimes you say do not start or write your ideas as clearly as possible. Okay? If you don't understand it yourself, rewrite it again. And if you can't seem to make it clearer, ask a friend to read it maybe. They can explain it to you, and maybe that can help you too. Now, some people write the introduction and then go from introduction to the body to the conclusion, right? Oftentimes this is actually not a good way of doing it. In fact, probably it's better to start with the body and then work on the intro later on. Okay? But everyone is different. Do whatever is comfortable for you and easiest. Oftentimes you might work with the easy part first and then work towards the hard part, right? Okay, things to consider with the first draft. Each paragraph should focus on a single claim, okay? Or one of the items in the outline, right? And then the idea then help to establish this overall argument or purpose of the paper, right? Okay. Now, when you're doing this, also in the first draft, keep track of your citations. Okay? I've seen a lot of students that write stuff and they don't remember where they got it from. Okay? So make sure you keep track of your citations, right? Start compiling that reference list, right? It's at the end of the paper, you have that listed down, right? Now, your teacher will tell you which format they want it, right? Whether it's going to be MLA or APA or whatever, right? So make sure you find out what the format they require and start using that. Now, nowadays you can actually download an article on the internet or whatever and then say, I want the citation in APA format, right? It actually does it for you. And all you do is type this, right? So do that, right? Now, so make sure you know what your citations are, what those papers are saying, and so you know where to reference it in that paper. Okay, now the next thing that you might want to do is the introduction or the background. Okay? In the introduction or background, you kind of have to answer three things, right? What the paper is all about, okay? So this would include the background. And sometimes you have to define some keywords, especially in science, you need to define that. Why you're writing it? Why is it worthwhile for someone to read it, right? Is this new material? Is it insightful material, for example? Is it on something that's very important? Is it an issue that's important? And does this essay kind of help define or answer this issue, right? And finally, how you're going to do it is how we build that argument. And this is kind of like a map in the initial part of it, right? And you're going to kind of briefly discuss this, present the key elements to it, and then finally work on it in the body part of it. Okay, so the next part is to write the body. And again, to use the outline to guide you. We'll check the writing every time against your thesis statement. Each paragraph would have the topic sentence, which is the main information about that paragraph. Make sure it's correct. Make sure you check it against your outline. Try not to repeat information, right? Okay. Try not to just cut and paste and make the paper look longer. Just make sure it's actually concise papers are much easier to read, right? Make some transitions smooth between sentences, paragraphs, and sections. Okay? Now, if you don't catch it this time, you can do that the second round, right? Make sure that things fit in nicely with the flow next to it, right? Finally, write the conclusion. In the conclusion, you need to make sure that the reader is going to see how everything comes together, right? The reader needs to see that path to the conclusion, right? The conclusion also gives the paper a sense of finality, okay, by connecting those arguments together with the issues that are raised in the background, right? Okay. So that's important too. You might want to point out in the conclusions, as a summary, what the paper did and what it didn't do, right? What it didn't do could be something bad for a future paper, right? And some readers really appreciate that. Now, the conclusion should be not too long, it should be pretty brief, right? A lot of times you can accomplish this by maybe about 4 or 5 sentences, and that comes together quite nicely. Okay, now, some of us are going to need help when we write our paper, right? You guys all know about the Writing Center on campus? No? You know? Oh, that's a very nice young lady there that helps people write papers. Okay? It's in the library, actually. Yeah. This actually, oops. Okay. This is actually taken off the website of the library, right? So if you go to the library, you actually don't have to physically go there. Okay, but I say go there because you're going to meet Sarah. She's a very nice person. But you can actually make an appointment through an app there, or you can email the Writing Center or attach Google Doc so that this person can do the edits too. So if you're shy, you don't want to go see this person, you can do that. I can tell you, it's probably better to see face-to-face because what we can discuss, right, with this person, how we can improve the paper, right? So make sure you make use of this Writing Center, right? We pay her for a reason, to help you guys, right? And make sure you use that. So, make use of the Vernon Writing Center, right? Okay. So, this is where, after the first draft, after writing the whole paper, we're now going to start writing it, rewriting it, and revising it, right? Okay, so as we look at this, we need to make some considerations. We need to make sure that the vision of the paper is still there. Does it fit your thesis statement? Okay? Is it the same information you're getting, right, as you rewrite it, right? Because sometimes when you rewrite it, it may change the meaning. Something's quite a bit, right? Now, this is the time, too, where you're going to find your argument may not be complete. there's a gap, right? So you may want to include another paragraph to make up for that gap. So you go back to the library, find a paper that will fulfill that gap, right? So make sure you do that, right? This is the time now to reorganize your paragraphs maybe, to make it flow better. Sometimes moving a paragraph earlier on might work better, right? So do that. A lot of times when you read the paper, okay, after it's done, you're going to find that, hey, you know what, this section is not necessary, right? If you don't need it, cut it out, okay? It's not going to help you with extra grades, right? Condense your paper if necessary, right? Be concise. I always appreciate a paper that gets to the point and tells me exactly what they're trying to say, okay? English teacher might like it a little differently, so make sure you know your teacher too, okay? Ask your teacher, right? Okay, so when we're revising globally within the whole paper, we need to proofread, right? We need to confirm that the paper completes every check or task specified in the assignment sheet, right? And the assignment sheet says this is an argumentative paper. Make sure it's argumentative, right? Okay. Check for logical organization, flow of the paragraphs, again, make sure that it reads well. Check the paragraphs against background information, the introduction, the thesis statement. Okay. Make sure that the topic sentences line up with the thesis statement too. Okay. And if there's unnecessary information, you might need to get rid of it, right? Okay. And if there's any terms that we use, sometimes when we write different areas of the topic, we need to be using new terms. Make sure you define it. Make sure that's defined, right? So that's within the whole paper globally, right? Okay, the next part of it is actually more in the small details, right? These are the things I will find out. This is frustrating. Sentence structure, okay? This is where the writing example can help you a little bit. Grammatical errors, right? Have you heard of Grammarly? Put it through Grammarly, right? It can help you pick up some of these things, right?
So how can't we use AI, but we can use?
You can't use, well, Grammarly is more checking grammar and stuff like that. And it's not so much,
What if it's an English paper? What if we have to do English speech?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'll let you teach you to study that. Formatting, some teachers have very specific formatting, right? Make sure you follow that. Check for transition words and phrases, and then you need to link paragraphs together to make them obvious, right? Check for typos now, right? You get the word processor, picks up all the typos, right? Cut unnecessary words out, or maybe use a better synonym, right? That word maybe doesn't really describe it, but find an alternate word that does a better job, right? Do that, right? Check for consistency in aspects such as heading formatting, spelling, things like that, tenses too, and stuff like that, right? And then of course proofread again, right? Okay? So that's another thing that we need to do. Okay. And that brings us to the end of the lecture. Okay, any questions, people? So those of you that are writing furiously, remember I said that you have access to this on all my slides. Okay? Any questions before I go? Forms. You see me in biology with 1.16. So even if you're not a biologist, you